Get ready to uncover truths and reality of today's politics. Here's your host, Lori Mills.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Uncover California. I'm Lori Mills. Well, our president has been very, very busy. I don't know if you saw today, but he made a deal with Pfizer. Seems that drug prices might come down as much as 1,000%. He's an amazing man, and I'm just waiting for the left's next meltdown. 3, 2, 1. Other than that, in today's news, we're watching the National Guard get deployed to cities like Chicago, and I can't wait to see them there. Antifa has been labeled a domestic terrorist group, and it's about time. They've been harassing people for years, and I'm sorry, they're not innocent. The anti-fascist group Antifa are the fascist. So I'm really glad to see them going down. We have a really busy show today, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. Our first guest, Dinesh D'Souza, will be speaking to us about his new film, The Dragon's Prophecy. Number 2, Dr. Wen Chen. She came here from China in the 90s and realized she had been brainwashed her whole life. And she's watching the infiltration of our country by the CCP, and she's got a lot to tell us. So everybody buckle up, stay tuned. We'll be right back. So many of you caught the episode we did with Dr. Stella on the show. Well, let me tell you something. That Covalite, I'm obsessed. This little powder tastes so good, and yet it has helped me with brain fog. And I've also been using her Covalite spray, and that stuff, you guys know I've always struggled with this cough. It is improving. Ever since COVID, I've had it. Well, now I've ordered another product from her called Moringa. And this product is supposed to help a woman like me who's post-menopause stop having body aches at night. This started with me like 3 months ago, where my ankles would be sore when I would get in bed and my hips would kind of ache. And I'm a side sleeper, and I got to the point I couldn't sleep on my side. So I can't wait to try that product. I'll keep you guys updated on the progress, but I want you to go to her website, drstellamd.com, and use promo code CALI, C-A-L-I, and try some of these products. Her products aren't to heal you. Her products are to keep you well. And then she does have some products, being a frontline doctor that was censored and banned during COVID. She has things for you in case you ever do get COVID or you ever do get sick. So again, go to drstellamd.com, use promo code Kelly for a discount. General Michael Flynn, I need you to go buy his new books. The Role of the Church, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. On the General Flynn store, you can find all sorts of great things to get you prepared to be equipped with truth. Support the show. Use generalflynn.com/REF/Lori Mills, and you'll help uncover California while equipping yourself for the battle ahead. Local politics has national impact. Go General. Our first guest is Dinesh D'Souza. I've been following Dinesh for decades. I used to watch his debates before Charlie was debating anybody with people like atheist Christopher Hitchens, and he always put forward such a case for Christ. You gotta love that. Well, he's made a new film, The Dragon's Prophecy. Let's take a look at a clip.
Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon. Revelation 12:3.
Once again, an armed attack in the Middle East, but this time it's different.
October 7th was the devil's holiday.
It's very hard to believe what happened, even though I was there and seeing with my own eyes and seeing them laughing and killing and having fun with it.
Because if you don't open the door, they are going to kill you and they are going to kill me, so please open the door.
So who are the Jews? Who are the Palestinians? And whose land is it really? Could the fate of the world, of humanity itself, be somehow tied to this place?
The nation of Israel is a resurrected nation. So what if there was going to be a resurrection of another people, an enemy people of Israel? The Bible speaks about this whole war as a dragon representing the enemy attacking a woman representing Israel.
The civilian deaths on both sides represent victories on the part of the dragon.
Hamas did everything within their ability to maximize the civilian casualty.
We came back to a land that was largely barren and empty, and we brought it back to life, and we're going to keep it.
The devil hates the Jewish people because they represent the existence of God.
Because without that Jewish foundation, there is no Christianity.
If we're approaching the end of time, God will reveal himself more and more dramatically.
Speak back through the stones. The story that they've been telling is that Israel is a colonial project. The problem with that is the city of David. We are an inconvenient truth.
Are you aware of any significant archaeological finding that contradicts the Bible?
No.
God's word stands firm. The dragon will not prevail.
Your message here is become a dragon slayer.
Based on Jonathan Cahn's #1 international bestseller, The Dragon's Prophecy.
Dinesh D'Souza, welcome to Uncover California.
Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you, sir. I did get to preview your film, The Dragon's Prophecy, and I might say, as someone who has studied eschatology for a long time, I found it fascinating and I learned a lot. What brought you to basically create a film out of Jonathan Cahn's book?
Well, it's different for me. Most of my earlier films have focused on the meaning of America. This is a film that takes into account the political, the war, Israel versus Hamas, the larger landscape of radical Islam and its march through not just the Middle East, but attempts to infiltrate Europe and America. And then the spiritual dimension, the biblical perspective. So the film is pulling a lot of threads together into a somewhat complex tapestry, but I think it's very appropriate for our time. I think after Charlie Kirk's assassination, we're kind of aware that underneath our political battles is a spiritual battle. And people often say that, but they don't identify the combatants. Like, who's fighting? Well, who's fighting really is God and the devil. And it goes back to the beginning of time. And so there's a world behind the world. And the events we see before us are have that kind of deeper biblical and spiritual resonance. So this film tries to bring it all out in a way that helps people not only understand, but in the end be edified, be lifted up. We all want to be part of this revival, and the film shows you the way to do that.
Well, Charlie actually went to our church. My pastor, Pastor Rob McCoy, started Turning Point Faith with him. So we are all about the full armor of God here. And seeing what happened during the Biden administration, where we actually had a severe infiltration of this country, I would say 20 miles from here, they had found an Iranian terrorist cell. And I don't think people realize the infiltration of this ideology into our country and around the world. I look at places like London right now. It's unrecognizable. What are your thoughts on just this globalist movement to take over the world.
Well, this is very important to see that you have the jihad of the sword, and that's going on with Hamas and Hamas backers, which include places like Sudan and Turkey and, of course, Iran. But there's also a different kind of jihad, and this is the jihad of infiltration. It's happening in Australia, Canada, Europe, the United States. I'm in Red America, Texas, and you find, a proliferation of mosques in Houston, in Dallas. The jihadis want to take over school boards. They want to run for office. They want really 100 Ilan Homars. So this is all going on. Now, here you have little Israel. It's 10 million people. And yet it is very effectively fighting radical Islam. This is a point I wanted to stress in the film, that Netanyahu, whatever you think of him, is really tough. And he can take this battle even to countries a lot bigger than his, oil-rich countries that have a lot of resources. Of course, Muslims are 2 billion people in the world. Jews are, 25 million? So this is truly David versus Goliath. I must say in this context, it's particularly disturbing that you've got now this sort of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiment on the right, which somehow treats Israel as the villain. Suddenly, Israel has become Goliath. Suddenly, countries like Qatar have become David. This is so upside down. This is so twisted that I want to take just a straightforward stance against it, even though I know some of these people. I've spoken at Candace's at Blexit events, and I did a tour last year in Australia with Tucker Carlson. But you know what? We became friends on other issues. And so I don't think it carries over to this kind of stuff, particularly when you're poisoning the minds of a lot of young people. Young people, a lot of them are confused, they're frustrated, they're bitter. It is true that institutions have lied to them, from the CDC to the FBI, so they have this built-in distrust, and it's very easy to play on it, to say things like, well, Israel really killed Charlie Kirk. You see that picture of a pipe? Some Mossad guy climbed out of that pipe and he got off a shot. It really wasn't the trans-allied guy. Look, not only, first of all, is this stupid and wrong-headed and you don't have any evidence for it, and you're making up stuff and you're conducting this bogus investigation that never produces any results, but the worst thing about it is it divides MAGA, not only ideologically, but generationally. And not only that, it kind of gets the shooter off the hook. The shooter can go into court and say, well, listen, apparently there are lots of people who think that Israel did this. The intelligence services, Mossad did it, so I couldn't have done it. And if you have any doubt about that, you got to let me go, because I'm not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So I cannot look at these things as just ignorant. I think that there is an element of the pernicious. I want my film to be firm in that regard, even though ultimately it transcends all this nonsense and it puts things in a much larger historical and biblical perspective.
And I appreciate that so much. Even the fact that you started out with October 7th, which was an atrocious, horrific day. And there were things that you had put together in the film. Israel's no larger than New Jersey. I believe it's about 2.5 miles across, yet God has brought the people back to their homeland. And something you had pointed out inside the film were the colors of the Palestinian flag. I had never caught on to that they are actually the same colors of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I believe a lot of this is a spiritual blindness. And when I look at other people that profess to be Christians not see through the deception, it's quite disturbing to me, especially since the death of Charlie. It seems like we are somewhat in a revival. What is your take on that?
Well, I think that our revival is going to depend on not simply listening for what God wants us to do. That's very important. But also to understand what the devil is up to, right? And the devil in the film is called the dragon. That's the dragon in the dragon's prophecy. It refers to a passage in the book of Revelation where the dragon is at war with the woman. The woman represents Israel, and the woman is pregnant, representing the Messiah, representing Jesus. Now, the key point is that the devil cannot defeat God. So what the devil does, the devil figures out what is important to God. Let me go and ruin that, and this will give me some revenge. So if you look at Genesis 1, why does the devil target Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve didn't do anything to the devil. The devil has no grievance against them, but the devil knows that Adam and Eve are God's cherished creation. So, all right, let me ruin them. This will give me the last laugh on God. For the same reason, the devil picks on the Jews. If the Jews are God's chosen people, let's drive them out from their ancestral homeland. Let's reverse this recongregation of the Jews in Israel. Let's send them away from the river to the sea. Not only that, let's take their holiest place, the temple that Solomon built, which was apparently on the site where Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son Isaac. Let's take that site and put an Islamic victory arch on top of it called the Dome of the Rock, with an adjoining mosque called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And so it's almost like the devil himself has descended and said, let me occupy the holiest place in Judaism and Christianity. And look, this is not just biblical speculation. You can go stand in the middle of Jerusalem and you're staring at the temple. So this is an actual historical monument that is still standing, administered by the Islamic authorities, and Jews are forced to now pray on the edge of it, the so-called Wailing Wall. That's the closest that they can get to the temple.
And there's so much archaeological evidence for what we believe. Being a born-again Christian, our faith isn't blind. And the fact that we're watching biblical prophecy happen in our lifetime, and I've been watching it since I was saved, but there is a verse in Revelation which I find interesting. And you had talked about the Dome of the Rock being on top of the mount. However, there is a verse in Revelation that talks about leaving the outer courts to the Gentiles. And I was curious, as far as mapping does of that area where the Solomon's temple was, would the Dome of the Rock be considered right there where the temple was, or would that be considered the outer courts? Do you know?
It's a very good question, and I will say it's a little bit of a disputed question, simply for this reason, that Solomon's original temple does not exist anymore.
Right.
The second temple, which was built by King Herod, was built on that site, but Herod enlarged it so much, he expanded it so much, he made it much more spectacular than the original temple, so that now we find ruins of the temple, and people do try to go back and say, it was exactly here, it was exactly there. The general pattern of the temple is known, and yet its exact location is not known. And so as a result, there is some, and by the way, this is true in Jerusalem in general, there are some things that are known and there are some things that are disputed. The Via Dolorosa, the path that Jesus walked, some people say it's over here, some people say it's over there. Now, where Jesus was crucified, that location is probably known. Also, if you go to Nazareth, they appear to have found the ruins of the childhood home of Jesus. This is just downright spectacular and amazing. This is also in the film. So what the film does is it sort of takes you down this eerie pathway where you're in the political. At the same time, you're very aware that there is the weight of history, and yet beyond that, there is the sort of spiritual dimension that's playing into it all. Biblical archaeology, which points back to the past, biblical prophecy that points to the forward, and of course, we're all living in the present. So in this sense, the film has a much wider scope than anything I've done before.
And I thought it was brilliant, even the archaeological evidence that you pointed out, like the step that had Caiaphas's name on it. I thought that was fascinating. That, again, we do walk by faith, but there's a lot of evidence to what we believe and why we believe it. You had said something pretty interesting just a minute ago, and that was Satan's attack on who God loves. Now, I can't help but think of the largest attack that we're seeing today, and that's on our children, trying to transition them into other sexes. The unfettered abortion and how many children are aborted. It seems that Satan has a huge attack on children now. Do you see that as well?
I see it in this way, that the devil sort of has two seemingly independent platoons. I don't use this term in the movie, I'm just coming up with it now. One platoon is the platoon of radical Islam, and the other platoon is the cultural left. And these platoons at the first glance appear to be unconnected, right? They don't seem to have much in common. The radical Muslims want Sharia. The cultural left, they're basically LGBTQ. They believe in sexual permissiveness. You become what you identify with. So these two platoons cannot exist very easily in each other's world. You can't take the LGBTQ and stick them into Gaza. That wouldn't work out too well. And conversely, it's not easy to take radical Muslims and put them on the Folsom street fair, where men are dressed up as dogs and whipping each other and so on. And yet, they are allied. They are joined at the hip. At Columbia University, they march in the same rallies. It's almost like the cultural left says, we are a kind of rainbow coalition. We got the blacks over here, the feminists over here, the gays over there. Hey, radical Muslims, you're another ethnic group. You too can join in. So this is the devil's army, right? And I think the message of our film, Dragon's Prophecy, is this, that these people are united not by a common goal, but by a common enemy. And that enemy is the people of God. It's not just the Jews, but also the Christians, because Christians are spiritual Israelites. We are engrafted onto, the New Testament is engrafted onto the Old Testament. And this is, by the way, why I don't like the people today who are saying somehow that, when Jesus came, the Old Testament became abandoned, as if to say that God the Father doesn't matter anymore. We have God the Son and we have God the Holy Spirit. So the Trinity is now down to two people and we can get rid of the Old Testament. Well, you might be able to get rid of the Jewish dietary laws, but we can't get rid of the Ten Commandments. We can't get rid of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. We can't really get rid of the prophets. So this is, to me, this is not a debate between covenant or dispensational. This is like sheer outright heresy and a departure of the mainstream of Christianity, which sees, I remember learning as a child that the New Testament is in the Old concealed, and the Old Testament is in the New revealed. These two are attached together. They're inseparable, just like the root and the branch of a tree. And so we're seeing, I think, in our time, not just a lot of political confusion and hatred and malevolence, but a lot of spiritual confusion and malevolence. And so it seems to me that the good people need to band together because the bad people sure are.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that the tepid church is being exposed right now. I know for our church, we're having such growth right now just because other churches don't want to talk about Charlie. They don't want to talk about the truth. And these things are intertwined. If I look at our Constitution, if we look at that, God is throughout. God is throughout our Constitution and the amendments, and everybody's saying democracy. Well, the only place I have seen democracy is in the Federalist Papers, and Madison was clearly against a democracy. And being a Californian, I can tell you we've got a democracy, this one-party supermajority that is completely tyrannical. So I don't want a democracy. I want our constitutional republic that is under the protection of my Lord Almighty. I'm watching Canada right now even, and they've really gone over to the dark side. How do you think we can prevent infiltration and just this boom of Gnosticism and heresy in our own country? How do we fight against that, Dinesh?
Well, a lot of the strategies of the bad guys are driven by the invertebrate weakness of the good guys. The bad guys will try something bad and they wait to see if there's a response. And if they notice that the good guys are quiet, trying to avoid the issue, ducking it, then the bad guys they become encouraged. Their aggression is increased. So part of what I think this film exposes is that the devil, the dragon, is very cunning. The dragon knows how to put good people in a bad position. Here's a case in point. Hamas. It's sort of like if somebody does a home invasion on you. They attack you, they kill your wife, they rape your daughter, they shoot up your house. In desperation, you grab your gun, you chase after them. They jump into a truck, but then they come out of the truck, and each one of them is holding his own wife and 7 kids in front of them. And they go, "You don't dare shoot because we have women and children right here. And if you shoot, it's going to make you a murderer." Now, first of all, you're not responsible for the safety of their wife and children. They are. They're the ones putting their family members in danger. And yet you are in a very difficult position. It's like, what do you do? So Israel is in that position. And again, think of how outrageous it is when the dragon, inspiring these Hamas guys, is doing this kind of cult-like death sacrifice of their own kids. And yet you have people, I'm not so surprised it's coming from the left, but I am surprised it's coming from the right, who will still point the finger of blame at Israel, so they're blaming the person whose home is invaded for doing the most natural thing in the world and wanting to go after the attackers who created this abomination.
And what is just amazing to me, you know as well as I do, if they would have released the hostages, this more than likely would have been over a long time ago, yet they don't want to. Explain to everybody how Hamas uses hospitals and schools and places like that to put on attacks, so if Israel does hit, it does look like they're destroying the innocent.
Well, we've known how Hamas gets embedded in, and I don't want to imply that the civilians in Gaza are totally innocent. Almost every civilian home has a cache of weapons. These are the people dancing in the streets right after October 7th. Some of them were even happy to stomp on the bodies of some of the corpses dragged through the streets. I've seen all that footage, and as you know, our film opens with October 7th. And it opens with October 7th, not as seen from the Israeli side, but from the Hamas side. It's almost like you're on a motorcycle, you have a GoPro on your head, and you're riding into Israel with Hamas. Why? Because Hamas took the footage. Hamas filmed it. So we have Hamas's own film of how this all happened. Yes, look, the key thing to think about these guys in Hamas is that they revel in this kind of destruction. Here's a simple question. My wife and I are having this discussion, and my wife goes, "Why doesn't Israel take hostages?" Kind of stops you in your tracks, right? Because we never imagined that Israel would dream of taking hostages. So I was about to answer and say, well, it's because Israel is a morally superior society. They don't do that kind of thing. But my wife said, that's actually not the real reason. She goes, the real reason is this: Hamas wouldn't care. Hamas would be like, sure, you got 30 women and children, go ahead and kill them. We'll put another 30 on the chopping block for you, because the more you do that, the more we're going to go running to the UN and running to the media, and we're going to present you as butchers. So this is our game to set you up to do things like this. So there is an absolute chasm of moral, there's a moral chasm that separates the Israel on the one side from Hamas on the other.
And I did see in the film as well, they train their children from a very young age to hate Israel and to want to kill Israelites. Get into that a little bit. Is that across the spectrum in Palestine?
Well, it says in the Bible that the Philistines, the ancient enemies of Israel, trained child soldiers. When David is getting ready to fight against Goliath, Saul tells him, don't do it. He warns him. He goes, you can't go up against that guy. He has been a warrior since his youth. So this notion, which is now carried on in a very eerie way among the Palestinians, of having little kids brandishing swords and guns. Look, in some ways, once you say that the Jew is the enemy of humanity and the Jew is a butcher, you've supplied the theory of it. Then it just becomes a matter of what you do about it. And so that these young children think it's heroic to become a terrorist. Look, it's not all that different from the guy who shot Charlie Kirk, right? If you were to say to somebody, let's say somebody of a little bit of a disturbed mind, and you say, look, there is a fascist threat that's brewing in America. It's very real. In fact, the President of the United States is directing it, and he's got all these commandos and foot soldiers of fascism, and one of them, Charlie Kirk, is coming to your campus. We need to stop this kind of thing, quote, by any means necessary. Now, so far, I'm just using the mainstream rhetoric of the left, things that you'll hear from people like Chuck Schumer and AOC and Elizabeth Warren. Now, it seems to me, A, if you're dealing with the fascist, and B, if you have to take any means, not some means, but any means to stop them, the shooter goes, well, that's what I'm doing. I'm taking the theory and I'm putting it into practice. These guys talk a good game, but I will follow through on the implications of what they're saying. So I think both in America and, of course, on the streets of Gaza, you have this kind of toxic ideology, and no surprise, you're going to find some takers who act on it.
And it's pretty concerning right now because the rhetoric is not calming down. And I hate to say unfortunately, but I have to. Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution allows free speech. It allows our Congress to knowingly lie to the American public. Is there anything, I mean, you're a very well-versed man. Is there anything that we could do, not violating the Constitution, but actually putting some accountability to these members of Congress that are knowingly, for 10 years now, lying to the American people, saying President Trump is a dictator, he's a fascist. And I contribute that to 2 assassination attempts and the execution of Charlie Kirk.
Well, we go very far in this country in protecting freedom of speech. President Lincoln, in the early years of the Civil War, expressed a lot of frustration because there were Northern Democrats that were telling soldiers to desert from the army. And this was, of course, a serious problem for the Union side. And Abraham Lincoln said, and I'm now kind of quoting him pretty much verbatim, "Must I shoot the simple soldier boy who deserts, while I must leave untouched the wily agitator who induces him to desert?" So in other words, Lincoln knew that you've got these 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and these days on social media, you can see these kids and they look a little bit high on fentanyl. They certainly look all messed up, and they're like, Israel's the problem, the Jews need to go. But I'm like, you know what? You guys are messed up. I don't really even blame you so much, but I blame the Pied Pipers who are leading you to the precipice. Those are the people who know better. Those are the people who need to be accountable. So yes, I'm glad that Trump has ramped it up, at least in terms, I mean, I'm excited about this Comey indictment. I hope that there's Brennan is next and Clapper. But really the instigators of all this are Hillary and Obama. So
and Adam
I hope
Schiff.
They don't get away. Adam Schiff get away scot-free. Let me just wrap this up in this way. I mean, this is a film that when I made it was not as timely as it is now. I made it because of an interest in biblical archaeology on October 7th, but little would I know that we would be in the teeth of all this, with a peace plan being worked out, and Hamas kind of now on the line. But this issue has exploded in the West and here in America. And it's threatening the country, but it's also threatening the MAGA coalition. I think the film takes a very firm moral stand. It's standing squarely on truth and on the Bible. And so I hope it can play a role in enlightening people, in countering some of this Pied Piper propaganda. and also playing a small part in what I hope is not just a national, but a global revival and cultural restoration.
Well, Dinesh, I want to thank you so much for your time and let everybody know where they can find your film and where they can find you.
The film is in theaters October 6th and October 8th. So very easy to remember, the 2 days right alongside October 7th. It's in about 400 theaters. You get tickets from the website, which is the Dragons, plural, the dragonsprophecyfilm.com. If you put in your zip code, the theaters will come up. And then the next day, October 9th, it's in streaming, it's in DVD. So I prefer you see it in the theater because I make these films highly cinematic. It's going to be quite an experience to watch it in the theater. But if you can't, no problem, watch at home. And you can sign up for streaming and order your DVDs now. You go to the dragonsprophecyfilm.com.
And let me ask you another question. Let's say somebody wants to host you for a Q&A and rent out a theater. Are you open to doing anything like that?
Well, it's a little hard to get me in, I would say, especially in this age of security, right? Because these days I have to come not just I used to go, with one security guy, and he basically, but today you have to come with an army, right? Because let me put it this way. Charlie Kirk was not killed because of his view of tariffs, right? There are a few issues in this country that get you shot: abortion, the trans issue, Palestine. So we actually even were thinking about, we canceled the idea of doing a movie premiere for this exact reason. We're like, we'd have to get there like the 82nd Airborne, to be there keeping watch. So here's the bottom line. We're going to set up a mechanism for groups and churches to screen the film. It's going to be it'll be on the website, and we have a way for them to be able to do that. And I'm happy to come online and discuss it when the occasion is appropriate. So let's just leave it at that. Have people check out the film. It's the dragonsprophecyfilm.com.
And it's a fabulous film, you guys. Make sure you check it out. And if you can get to a theater, I can tell you, I'm going to go watch it in the theater again. There's so much information in this film. Probably one of the best documentaries I have seen in a very long time. So thank you, Dinesh, and I appreciate you. And a lie cannot stand in the light of truth. So push on, brother.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody, stay tuned. Our next guest, Dr. Wen Chen. She's going to tell us everything you need to know about the CCP and their infiltration of America. I have great news. The MAGA Mall has new merch. The new Trump collection is over the top. Look at my new hat. FAFO, you know what that means. So if you want one of these hats or one of the other great hats that they have for merchandise, go to themagamall.com and use promo code CALI, CALI, and get your FAFO hat. Or you can get a Trump 2028 hat and trigger the left. It's a great time here at Uncover California. Our next guest, Dr. Wen Chen, came here from China back in the 90s. I saw her speaking at an event not too long ago, and I had to have her on. She's going to tell us about propaganda. She's going to talk about infiltration into our country of the CCP. And she is seriously at risk. Her brother's been arrested in China. He's been gone for 2 years. She's got a lot to get to. So let's go ahead and bring her in. Dr. Wen Chen, welcome to Uncover California.
I'm very glad to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Many don't know, I saw you speak about a week ago, and your talk was fascinating. Tell everybody your story about living in communist China and how you came to America.
So I was born and raised in China. I came to the US in the mid-90s for graduate school. I had a very good academic record in China, so I got a full scholarship to come to the US to study. And I got my PhD on biology from the California Institute of Technology. And that was the year of 2000. And then I was offered a job to work here at the Caltech as a staff scientist. So I have spent the past 30 years in Pasadena, California. And this is now my home. I'm American now, right? I'm an American citizen. I raised my family here. But what is very important for me during these 30 years was how I realized that I was a very brainwashed student in China before I came here. And I remember it was 1995. My American colleagues asked me about the Tiananmen massacre, the tank men, right? Tiananmen massacre in 1989, the Chinese government killed thousands of citizens and students. And the whole world knew about it, but I did not. I was a high school student when the Tiananmen massacre happened. What I learned in China was that those students on Tiananmen, they killed soldiers. So that was the opposite story.
So for those of you that maybe you're younger, Tiananmen Square was a brutal massacre where the government killed a bunch of students for standing up to them. And so you're saying when you came to America and you heard about that, you didn't hear that story. You heard something completely different.
Exactly. Those students on Tiananmen, they just asked for democracy, right? We see protests here all the time. People protest. But in China, if you step to street and you say something different from what the government says, you're in big trouble. Not only those protesters get killed, the government control all media in China. They also demonize those victims, made them look really bad to justify the persecution. So that was the beginning of my story. After I came to the US, I learned about Tiananmen massacre in 1995. And then I learned about other lies in China. It took me 5 years to realize that all my life in China, all those 20 years, what I learned were all lies. And I started to realize, okay, for the rest of my life, I need to take some action to tell the truth about China. Because not only the Chinese government lied in China, they also lied all over the world. They are now deceiving all Americans about China, about to cover up all the human rights abuses and all the terrible things they're doing in China. They're also doing terrible things in the United States. And that's what I want to cover today about China's transnational repression, how the Chinese government extend their hands to the US to shape American people's mind and tell good China story.
See, and this is so interesting, because we have seen an infiltration of China in our country. So explain to everyone from film to TikTok to all of these other platforms how the CCP has infiltrated us. And not only that, how when people buy items from China, a lot of this is being purchased for slave labor. And even worse, a lot of these people are organ harvested. Get into all of this.
Let's start from TikTok.
Yes.
I know over 50% of Americans use TikTok, right? And it's a Chinese company. And you know that the Chinese government control all companies in China. China has this law called the National Intelligence Law that demand all companies to follow government orders when they need to submit data of Americans to the Chinese government and what kind of contents they can provide on their media, right? Because it's a totalitarian regime. So the government can control your content. They can control your data, control everything. So that means if you use TikTok, you rely on TikTok to get news about the world. You put yourself inside a bubble of information crafted by the Chinese government. After a few years, you will feel wonderful about the Chinese government because, they made themselves look so good on TikTok, right? And this is how they spread the propaganda. It's like they crafted the whole bubble, like another word, a true lie. Like you live inside, you feel, okay, this is the whole world. There's no human rights abuse. China is a great tourist, spot, and the government of China took such wonderful care of people. That's a story the Chinese government crafted in the world of TikTok. And this is also the story the Chinese government crafted through our traditional media. If you think, okay, I read New York Times, I read Wall Street Journal, and all these media, they have business ties with China, right? The Chinese government built up business ties with almost every mainstream media in the US because the Chinese government pay them to run advertisements. And oftentimes, these ads are in news format, like in article format, with very tiny fonts somewhere say these are paid ad. And then, like, they provide the contents. Basically, these also tell good stories about China, just like TikTok. Like, it also seen in the mainstream TV and radio. And also in Hollywood, right? If you think about it, China is a big nation, the second largest film industry, around the world, like, the second largest country with all this audience, 1.4 billion audience. Every Hollywood film wants to enter the Chinese market. And to enter the Chinese market, you have to pass a censorship, of course. You have to say no human rights abuse in China, right? Not only that, you have to make something, praise the Chinese government, make the Chinese government look good to be chosen to enter the market, because China has a quota. Every year, they only allow 34 films, foreign films, to enter the market. That means you have to make a film favored by the Chinese government. So, like, if you think about the Hollywood productions like The Martian, right? Matt Damon stuck on Mars and he had to plant a potato, right? Who came to rescue him? The Chinese government, right? Here's a typical story. Tell a good China story. People would walk out of a cinema, say, I watched a great film in Hollywood and China was so wonderful. The Communist Party is our friend. They came to rescue us when we are in trouble. And communism is a better system than democracy because they have better technology. These are propaganda, right? If you think about it, Hollywood makes good, perfect propaganda for the Chinese government so that they can enter the market. At the same time, the Chinese government can brainwash Americans. And if you look at the education system, I have been spending my whole life in university, like doing research here, study here. And universities are the most heavily infiltrated because for decades, the Chinese government have always been inviting professors for wonderful trips to China, give them a very well red carpet treatment. These professors would come out with a very good impression, very positive impression about the Chinese government. And they would teach this to their students. And the students would repeat this route and became more and more pro-Chinese government. At the same time, the Chinese government would offer money to universities to run free Mandarin teaching programs like Confucius Institute. In 2018, more than 100 American universities operate Confucius Institute. That's a free Mandarin program provided by the Chinese government. That means everything's free. The Chinese government provides a free textbook, free teachers. And university students just take these lessons, right, from the Confucius Institute when they have to learn Mandarin, when they have to learn the Asian history. So here's a trick. They teach the Communist Party's version of history. What is the Communist Party's version, right? Remember what I learned in China. Tiananmen Massacre was about students killed soldiers. That was a version of Chinese history I learned in China. And if you study in Confucius Institute, think about what they would teach you, right? On the website of Confucius Institute, people discovered this video about the Korean War. So that was a version of Korean War they taught. They said Americans invaded North Korea and started the Korean War, and then Americans wanted to invade China. That was also the version of Korean War I learned in China, and that was also the version of Korean War students learned in Stanford in 2018 and in many other universities. So this is how the Chinese government used our education system to spread their propaganda.
And I want to stop you there really quick because there's something that you had said, and we are seeing it over the last 10 years more than we ever have. America is a constitutional republic. The only place democracy shows up in our founding documents is in the Federalist Papers. And Madison said it's a threat because it's mob rule. And I would say over the last 10 years or so, We keep hearing that phrase, threat to democracy, threat to democracy. Well, anybody that lives in California, we live under one party rule. We live under democracy, where Republican assembly members go into the House in Sacramento and their microphones are turned off. We just received our ballot book for this Proposition 50. Republicans get 40% of the vote, yet have 17% representation. And Gavin Newsom wants to gerrymander us more, so we only have 4% representation. He says it's to save democracy. And I really want us to start rejecting that term because it does mean mob rule. And I'm wondering how much of that is from the CCP, seeing how much Gavin Newsom seems to be in love with President Xi.
Yeah, I have to say, nowadays, people, if you do not look at countries like China, like Russia, right, you really do not know what is democracy, right? You cannot compare domestic violence to genocide, okay? It's not the same scale. I think it's a misuse of the phrase protect democracy when you try to apply this to these partisan arguments in California or in the US. I think democracy is so that everyone have the right to speak. Everyone has a right to express themselves. And through all these arguments, we find truth instead like putting your opponents into jail or shoot them on stage, right? That is a true disruption of democracy. When you use to weaponize the law, when you weaponize the system to attack your political opponents. And this is exactly what the Chinese government use all the time, right? If you ever go to a protest, like on Tiananmen massacre, right? If you ever say something the government do not like, they shoot you to death or put you into prison. And that is a true disruption of democracy.
But we saw that during Biden's administration. I mean, they tried to throw President Trump in jail for life. People, grandmothers, and people that walked into the Capitol building and maybe took a couple selfies were thrown into jail without due process. One man I've interviewed, Enrique, he wasn't even in D.C., and they threw him in jail. Extreme Brady violation, and he faced 22 years in prison and he wasn't even there. We watched Steve Bannon get thrown in jail. We watched Roger Stone get thrown in jail. And now they're switching it around saying that President Trump is going after his political opponents. However, these are the very people that started the Russiagate hoax, which was a lie. And they used that to overthrow the President of the United States. So what concerns me is I think that the left, unfortunately, is going in the route of communism. I don't think they're Democrats anymore. I saw a film in China with President Xi, and I want you to talk about this a little bit.
No.啊，请问一下音分在哪？什么？音分，收音那个。我不负责。
What was that all about?
That was the previous leader of the Chinese Communist Party, right? We're talking about the Communist Party as a mafia system. Even though that was a previous leader, the previous president of China, the new leader came, they can just drag you out of the way because now they want to take over. There's no respect and anyone can lose their power within the system and anyone can end up dying in a prison. So This is how the Communist Party works in China, at the bottom of the society, right? And I want to share the story of my own brother. So my brother took the opposite path from me. 30 years ago, I came to the US. I became a dissident, an activist for human rights in China. And my brother joined the Chinese Communist Party 30 years ago because he was intelligent. He had a PhD in China. He climbed high in the government. This is exactly the kind of life the left, my left-wing friends told me, like, once you join the party, you live a good life. So my brother did live a good life for only 30 years. 2 years ago, he was all of a sudden arrested by the party without any crime or anything. It's been like 21 months he was detained. He's still in prison. Well, not really prison, somewhere in China. We don't know. He's still arrested. And for 21 months, the government did not even bother to tell us what kind of crime he committed. Because what we read from news was that, okay, he did not follow the rule and he was not very supportive to the party. And many people told me that it was very likely because Xi Jinping does not like intellectuals, while my brother has a PhD from a top institute in China. And many intellectuals are removed nowadays by Xi Jinping because he wants to replace his people, to take this position, right? Like he wants people who are not educated so that they can be easily manipulated by him. So that's what the people told me. But still, for 21 months, we cannot communicate with my brother. Nobody were allowed to talk to him or visit him. We don't even know where he is. And the only time his wife was able to see him was when the government called his wife to meet him in another province in where he was detained. And in that very brief meeting, he pressured his wife to sell their house in Beijing and give the several $1 million to the Chinese government to exchange for his freedom. Okay, that's weird, right? It's more like what a mafia does. They confiscate everything of yours, and then they look at it, the last thing you have is your house because you still live there. They force you to sell the house, give the money, and then they will set you free. And under this pressure, his wife sold their house, moved out, and gave the money to the government. The party took the money and broke its promise. They did not release my brother. They even threatened to detain him for another 20, 30 years. So his wife, collapsed. Like she was like the wife was furious. Like she went to hire a human rights lawyer. She had to borrow money to hire a human rights lawyer to defend my brother. So this is what a loyal Chinese Communist Party member face in China, right? Even though you serve the party for 30 years, you're non-political, you just work there, you work very hard, you get paid well as a party member, but all of a sudden you lose everything. So this can happen in China. This can also happen in the United States in the future. If you think about how the Chinese Communist Party is extending their hands to the United States, right? They have their agents in the US. I was interviewed by California Insider, a podcast program of the Epoch Times, in January. So we talk about the Chinese spies in Los Angeles. The FBI already arrested 3 spies, Chinese agents in Los Angeles. And this group of spies, according to the Department of Justice criminal reports, they have about 7 or 8 members. And one of the one who was caught was called Mike Sun in Acadia. And Mike Sun was a campaign manager of Acadia Council member Eileen Wang. So Eileen Wang is still the Acadia Councilwoman. And according to the criminal report, Eileen Wang was a core member of this agent group. This is what was discussed by these agents, right? Through their, WeChat, through their emails, through their phone messages. That was the conclusion we got from the criminal report. So these agents, they have regular visits to China to meet their boss, to give reports, to apply for new fundings, right? They have funding to go to many political events, and they have funding to elect their members into the US political system. For example, one of their reports to Chinese government was that they successfully elected Eileen Wang into the Acadia City Council, so that's a successful project. And through Eileen Wang, they want to get in touch with other politicians and influence them. So you see the Chinese Communist Party is extending its hands into the US to gradually get into our political system, so that they can form policies, pro-China policies. And second, they have another big project is to wipe out people like me, because I do not tell good China story, right? I'm telling all the bad China story, how terrible the Communist Party is. They don't want to hear anything. They don't want us to speak. So you probably know that China runs over 100 police stations all over the world, at least 2 of them in Los Angeles. I still do not hear anything in Los Angeles to shut down the Chinese police station. You don't hear from them anymore. Like as if our elected officials do not care that the Chinese government is here for doing transnational repression to suppress American citizens like me, just because I criticize the Chinese government.
I believe that, in all honesty, our government here is sold out to the CCP. Gavin Newsom cleaned up San Francisco for 2 days for President Xi's visit and waved the Chinese flag as he arrived. And then you look at the CCP is buying land around our military bases. This isn't happening on accident, is it?
Exactly. When Xi Jinping visited San Francisco 2 years ago, right? Not only the Newsom, cleaned up the city, wiped out all these low-end people. And also many Chinese dissidents went to protest. They were beaten by the Chinese agents. They were beaten, physically attacked by the Chinese agents on site, and they were not protected by the San Francisco police. The police just stood aside, did not care that these Chinese agents physically attacked the protesters. So this is how terrible California is. Money can do a lot. Money can buy all the media, and money can spread all the propaganda and make all these politicians have a very positive view about China and think like China had no human rights abuses and all these protesters are troublemakers. So this is how they spread the propaganda. And, after infiltration for so many years, those politicians, they don't think anything wrong with it. They just think, okay, China is a great country. We have a good relationship, right? And Xi Jinping even promised, in San Francisco 2 years ago, that he would invite 50,000 American students to study in China, right? We're talking about American students go to China, get paid. They get money to go to China to study there. No need to pay anything, but the Chinese government would give them money to study in China. And of course, they would have a very positive impression about the Chinese government. And then they would come here, right, to become agents. They would say nice words about China and they would vote, right? So this is how the Chinese government control Americans, using money and all these media, education, entertainment.
And I'm seeing this kind of worldwide. For instance, a couple years ago, I went down to Costa Rica, and I was told by locals there that China purchased a stadium for Costa Rica, but so now all the government officials there are kind of enslaved to China. China is starting to move out throughout the world and place themselves in different areas. And they're infiltrating our infrastructure at the same time, along with, I would say, the Islamic extremists. We're watching people that do not have our values for freedom climb the ranks in government. Is that what you're seeing?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. We see the infiltration in the US, we see this in European countries, in Africa as well. Africa basically is already, many of the countries already become, colonies of China because of China's, this project called the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese government would bribe the elected officials in these third world countries, right? They bribe them so that China would take over their infrastructure, to build their infrastructure. And oftentimes these were expensive projects, cost a lot of money, and the country cannot afford to pay. Then after the the like airports were built, right? You cannot undo it. It's irreversible. Then Chinese government say, oh, since you cannot pay, we're going to take it over. Then basically you trick these countries and turn them into your colonies because they owe so much money to China, right? And once the Chinese government control their infrastructure, they can use it for military purposes. If you control airport or ports or railway, you can use them for military purposes, right? And you can also use these countries' vote in United Nations to always vote for China. That's why UN is a joke now, right? If you think about the UN Human Rights Council, most of the countries sitting in the Human Rights Council are China's allies, like, those countries in the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And according to the UN's Human Rights Council, China is perfect on human rights and America is terrible on human rights. Okay, they already turned the UN into a joke. Yeah. So this is what we're seeing in China. And also, I want to say, as Americans, of course, all of us know, like, if we want to protect our country, I try not to buy from China anything. If I hesitate whether I want it or not, I look at the label. If it's made in China, I say, okay, no, not this time, right? And if it's made in another country, I would buy it. And also we have to say, it's very important to wake up Americans, to make them realize that China is not an ordinary country. China is not Canada. China is not Japan, because China is a totalitarian regime with terrible, terrible human rights records. And human rights is very, very important subjects to be raised among Americans. Because if you think China has no human rights problem, right, most Americans would not care whether it's China dominated the world or Americans dominated the world. They say, what's wrong with China taking over? It's a great country, right? But you have to let them know China is having this huge genocide to Uyghurs. China is persecuting Christians. China is persecuting Falun Gong. So Falun Gong actually is the largest enemy of the Chinese government. This is a Chinese meditation practice. It's based on traditional Chinese culture with this value, truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. Because it's traditional Chinese, it became very, very popular in China. About 10% of Chinese practice Falun Gong in 1999. And that is what made the Communist Party nervous, because they saw so many Chinese following traditional Chinese value, not communism. And these are the Chinese they cannot easily brainwash. So China started a massive persecution to Falun Gong, put millions of people in prison, right? Took their organs for transplant, forced them to do slave labor. That's why you see so many cheap products made in China, because they're so cheap, because, companies do not have to pay for these labors. So Falun Gong also became victims of the forced organ harvesting in China. If you think about the US, if someone needs organ transplant, kidney transplant, you have to wait for 3 years until someone died from car accidents, have the perfect blood type match with yours, and happen to sign the donation agreement, right?
Or they've been trafficked in through our border. There was a big organ harvesting scam going on with that. Dr. Chen, I'm going to have you back. There's so much to talk to you about still, and we're out of time. I'm so bummed. But will you come back? I want to talk to you more about this.
Definitely. I think the subject about organ harvesting and human rights abuses in China is very important, because that is a key to awake the other 50% of Americans.
Okay, well, maybe we can get you back really soon, because I would love to continue this conversation. Let everybody know where they can find you, whether it's social media or if somebody would want to contact you to be a speaker. What should they do?
I have a blog, and so the blog is called Wen Chen View, WenChenView.blogspot.com. So I can probably provide you the link, and you can put it under the video if you want.
Absolutely.
And you can read my articles about my brother. You can see recordings of some of the interviews I did, some other speeches I did. You can contact me from my blog if you want me to speak, in another group.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I am going to get in touch with you right away, because I do want to book you soon so we can continue this conversation, because it's only getting more intense, and I think that the people need to know what you know. So thank you so much for coming on, and everybody else, we'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Lori.
All right. Bye, Dr. Chen.
Goodbye.
Okay, everybody, that's our show for this week. Make sure to tune in next week. And until then, stay safe, tell the truth, speak up, and seek God. If you enjoyed this video, remember to follow me on X at Lori Mills, 4CA42, Uncover Cali on Rumble, and Uncover California on YouTube.
California.